both options are highly valid and important, and we should explore ways to combine them according to the needs of different social groups of workers. So we will discuss all this with our 4 experts in the field: Beate Zimpelmann, professor at Bremen University; Silke, Raab, and Christina Stockfisch from DGB Federal Board. This is the German Trade Union Confederation. And Hampus Andersson, researcher at Kommunal's Federal Office, which is the Swedish Municipal Workers Union. And we will start right away with Beate Zimpelmann, which, as I said, is professor in political management and interdisciplinary sustainability management at Bremen University of Applied Science. And she's also chairwoman of the Competence Center for Sustainability in Global Change and co-editor with Margareta of the book Work Less, Live More, unfortunately in German yet. Beate, please, the floor is yours.
I have to begin now? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for the very friendly introduction. Yes, you told about our book. It's here, Working Less, Living More, and it talks about the new relevance of reducing working hours. And I will give you a few theses which are in this book worked out. The book presents several models and approaches to reducing working hours, including the experiences with the 4-day week in England, trade union collective bargaining approaches to reducing working hours, such as the time versus money option we already discussed, and models that look at the whole of work. This model defines work not only as paid work, but also include care work, voluntary work, and so-called personal work. Time for yourself to relax and to creative. And Vrijea, one of the pioneers of these models, it's also called 4-in-1 perspective, envisages that all 4 forms of work should and can have an equal place in every person's life. As a consequence, a strict application of the model would mean that every person has 4 hours, only 4 hours a day per type of work. And this would mean a very strict reduction of paid work. So, in my reflections on the question of a weekly reduction in working hours or a daily reduction, I take this whole of work approach as my starting point, and I will present 7 theses. So first of all, we look at the 4-day week and the conclusions of the first surveys. So first of all, the models of the 4-day week, they are very different. There are models which reduce working hours to 32 hours per week, for example, and others which keep the 40-hour week or the 38-hour week, and the employees have to work, depending on the model, 9 or 10 hours a day. So we have to look very differently on it. First thesis, a 4-day week leads to a better sense of well-being among employees. Employees have a feeling of more free time, even if the working week is compressed. Surveys conducted by the Bauer, it's the Federal Institute for Occupational Safety and Health in Germany, show this. Long daily working hours increase fatigue, but long recovery times at the weekend compensate for this. But on the other hand, we see, and different surveys show that the health aspects give preference to a daily reduction in working hours. Studies explicitly show that performance decreases and symptoms of illness increase after working 6 hours a day. So, second thesis. Experiments with the 4-day week in England show that the sickness absence is down by 65%. This is a very strong argument in favor of the 4-day week. A study by the Hans Böckler Foundation in Germany shows that the increase in sickness-related absences is one of the biggest challenges facing companies. The challenge is much greater than dealing with parental leave, which part-time work, or time or money options. Third thesis. One more argument in favor for a weekly reduction in working hours, however, is that it limits employees' scope for overtime, as a pilot project in Germany shows. One reason is that in Germany, it is regulated by law that a daily working time of 10 hours may not be exceeded. So, first, the 4-day week seems to have a lot of advantages. But now let's look in the model whole of work on this. And we look from this point of view, then we see that a 4-day week means a concentration of more time for personal work and leisure, as well as for voluntary work and care work on 3 days per week. Time for other forms of working during the week, on the other hand, are still restricted. If the daily working time of 8 hours is exceeded, this factor weighs even more heavily. Fourth thesis, what does this mean looking from the gender policy perspective? We see, for example, in Germany, a big gender time gap, about 8 hours per week, in other European countries too. Many women, 50% in Germany, choose to work part-time. Care work is still unpaid, and it is it is done mostly by women, and care work must be done the whole week, not only in the weekend. Kindergartens close at certain times, as do other childcare facilities. So there are arguments, I think, that a daily reduction in working hours is better for women and offers the opportunity to organize care work equally. But most important is a regulation that provides for a considerable reduction in working hours, a short full time between 25 and 32 hours. It offers both women and men the opportunity to balance their professional and private lives. Fifth thesis. From a climate change policy perspective, the 4-day week is preferable when it comes to saving on mobility and commuting and possibly heating costs, etc. However, if you look at the question of what people do with the free time they have gained, things can look very different. A long weekend can be used, for example, for short trips by airplane or for other forms of short trips, which are not good for the environment. But a large proportion of greenhouse gas emissions are caused by gainful employment. And only if we radically reduce working hours and actively shape structural changes, we will have the slightest chance of stopping climate change. Sixth thesis, we already heard, no model fits it all. Which model is better depends on the industry and the sector and depends on the employees and their wishes. A 4-day week is usually easier for companies to organize than a daily reduction in working hours. And shift work has additional logical requirements. We already discussed. Thesis 7. We need the debate about working time reduction, and we need experiments that show that it works. Obviously, the 4-day week is more suitable here than the daily reduction. The 4-day week and the projects to implement it are very important to show the advantages of working hour reduction. We see that it works, that's it important. And we see that a lot of people want to work less. For example, 80% of the employees in Germany say that they want a 4-day week. And gender and climate requirements show us that it is necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Beate. Hello, we have with us Silke Raab, is the head of the Unit for Equality-Oriented Family Policy in the Department of Women, Equality and Family Policy at the DGP Federal Executive Board, and Deputy Chairwoman of the Maternity Protection Committee and member of the Advisory Board of the Federal Family Forum. And Christina Stockfisch is a political advisor to European and international gender equality policies at the DGP, headquartered in Berlin, and she has worked for the DGP for more than 20 years in various departments, and she's also a member of the Work Council. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you for the warm welcome, Maria. I will give now a short input and answer your question afterwards together with my colleague, Christina Stockfisch. Dear participants in panel 2, dear colleagues, thank you for the invitation to the European Work Time Network Conference and for the opportunity to make an attempt to answer the question, daily reduction of hours or reduction of days. The answer consists of 3 parts. First, both. We need both. We need the one as well as the other. We know that the demands, the requirements, the wishes, the needs of employees today are very different. They differ depending on the sector, on the professional field, and especially on their personal circumstances. And that is why that cannot be put into one formula. That's the same message as Beate just told. Some employees need flexibility when it comes to starting and finishing work. Others need planning security and reliability in the organization of their work schedule, while others need above all the opportunity to have a participatory voice in the organization of their working hours. For example, we heard it before, when parents share care and supervision of their children, or when tasks for people in need of care are shared with others. And the vast majority of the employees need different working time arrangements depending on which phase of life they are in. Basically, one model does not fit all. Second, for employees with caring responsibilities, a reduction in working hours in form of a 4-day week is hardly feasible. We heard that before as well. I would like to illustrate this using Germany as an example once more, and maybe there are some more dates on the facts here in Germany. The labor force participation of women rose sharply between 1991 and 2023. The employment rate for women is 74%, which is only 7 percentage points lower than that of men. 23 years ago, the employment rate for women was 58%, 50 percentage points behind that of men. You can see the difference and the development in the last years. However, women's weekly working hours are still significantly shorter than those of men. While employed men work an average on 38 hours a week, the average working week for women is just under 31 hours. The gender time gap averages 7.7 or 8 hours per week. And every second woman works part-time, but only 13% of men. 27% of women working part-time have reduced their working hours due to childcare, compared to just under 6% of men. 2/3 of working mothers work part-time, but only 7% of fathers. This is the side of the paid working hours. Anyone looking at work from the gender perspective cannot do so without also considering Beate said it before, on the other side, on the unpaid care and housework. The question is, cleaning, washing, cooking, which of these does Jochen do? The English translation is missing the rhyme. In German it says, putzen, waschen, kochen, was davon macht Jochen? And these are the facts. On average, women do just under 30 hours of unpaid work per week, men just under 21 hours. That's an average of 9 hours more unpaid work per week, 1 hour and 90 minutes more per day. An extra 9 hours of unpaid care work per week equates to more than one additional normal working day. The gender care gap in Germany is 44%. Almost half of women's unpaid work consists of daily traditional housework, such as cooking, cleaning, and laundry. Women also spend almost twice as much time each day as men looking after, caring for, and supporting children and adult household members. Care work takes place every day. This is also the reason why a reduction in working hours in form of a 4-day week is generally not suitable for the fair distribution of unpaid care and housework. A reduction in working hours, for example, in male-dominated industries and professions in form of a 4-day week, does not contribute automatically to the fair distribution of paid work and care work in couple relationships, in which, in the best case, both parents should be able to earn their own living and perform care work. Why is that so important? Because the economic and social consequences of the gendered distribution of working hours, loss of income, limited career prospects, insufficient social security for life risks or in old age, are serious for women. They prevent them from shaping their own careers and lives. In socio-political terms, the consequences of the distribution of paid and unpaid labor between the sexes manifest themselves in the unequal distribution of income and wealth, professional positions, and political and economic power. Third, the increase in work-related stress in recent years, which is reflected in individual reductions in working hours or in rising absenteeism, also includes the stress factor of working hours. Working hours today are highly flexible in terms of operational requirements. They are too long and unhealthy, especially when it comes to shift systems. For people with caring responsibilities, there is also the double burden of employment and housework. The 4-day week was initially received positively and very favorably in the political debate and in media here in Germany. However, for around 1.5 years now, probably not least as part of the German government's growth initiative, employers and parties close to them have been calling for longer working hours. Their demands include longer working lives, longer working weeks, so-called experimentation areas for working hours, tax and duty-free bonuses for overtime, bonuses for extending the working hours of part-time employees, or a 4-day week without reduction in working hours. None of these demands contribute to a fairer distribution of paid labor and unpaid care work between men and women. On the contrary. 3 examples. Experimental rooms aim to undermine the legally stipulated rest period of at least 11 hours between the daily working days. This is detrimental to health, especially for employees with caring responsibilities. Bonuses for extending the working hours of part-time employees ignore the reality of people's lives and reinforce the narrative that people in Germany do not want to work enough. It reinforces the attitude that only paid employment is work and ignores the area of unpaid care work, without which society would not function. The idea of squeezing the 40 hours of work per week that are basically possible under the Working Hours Act into just 4 working days is also counterproductive for the assumption of care responsibilities in couple relationships. It discourages fathers from taking on more daily care responsibilities and is simply not feasible for mothers who continue to bear the majority of care responsibilities in the family up to today. What is the conclusion? We should not just take a reactive, defensive approach to the demands of employers. As trade unions, we need to counter the bold, we need to work longer hours again of the employers' organizations and the political representatives with concise, clear messages and a narrative, a positive narrative. We need a positive collective symbol in order to better stand up to the working time debate. Even if we know that the solutions are not that simple, the message should be clear. If the 4-day week can be this collective symbol, we should not shy away from conducting the working time debate with this message. It is important to lead the debate and mobilize employees with a positive message. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And now I'll give the floor to Hampus Andersson, last but not least, who is an investigator and a researcher.
Should I go?
Christina?
Okay.
An investigator and a researcher at Kommunal's federal office. As I said, Kommunal is the Swedish Municipal Workers Union, a public sector union, and he works with issues related to working hours and the working environment.
That's correct. So yeah, my name is Hampus. I work for Kommunal, the Municipal Workers Union in Sweden. We organize over 500,000 workers in a country of 10 million people, so it's quite a substantial force on the Swedish labor market. The vast majority of our membership are women, and I would say that from my experience, our members tend to prefer fewer days over shorter days. That was last week in Öland, a municipality in Sweden, where they've introduced a working time reduction in elderly care. And so the model is 85% working time with no loss in pay, for the reasons that were discussed previously, like difficulties in recruiting, retention, absenteeism, etc. But the model worked so that workers could choose whether they wanted to take this out in the form of fewer days or shorter days, and almost everyone, and this is a very female-oriented, dominated sector of the labor market, and almost everyone took it out in the form of fewer working days. So just like, I guess an educated guess or assumption is that the perceived social advantages of fewer days is greater than the alternative, because the shorter working day is still a working day, and in the sectors that we represent, people tend to come home after work, whether it's 6 hours or 8 hours, and the day is basically gone in terms of, they're exhausted when they come back from work. And this becomes, I think, more apparent when the reduction is relatively small. I was in northern Sweden, in Sollefteå, another municipality where we've negotiated a weekly reduction of only 2 hours. And so 2 hours spread out over 5 days would make very little difference for the individual worker. But the way they organize this is that for most people in this municipality, they take it out in the form of 1 day every 4 weeks. So they have, like, for people working from Monday to Friday, this implies a longer weekend once a month, which is very much appreciated by the people working there. So it has much more of an effect in the daily lives and puzzles of the people. And I mean, considering that, concentration factor, you can also say that, well, actually a 4 hour or a 4 day week is a less of a reduction than a 6 hour work day. So it's 32 hours instead of 30 hours, right? Well, that said, I agree with what's been said before. Like, we as a union obviously won't be taking a centralized stance on this issue. I mean, a 4 day week can be and is, I think, a very good and engaging slogan, and that can be used. But we're never going to, as unions, we're never going to write a 4 day week in a central agreement, right? We're going to negotiate on hours per week. Even like DGB pushing for a 4 day week, they're never going to write 4 days in the agreement. They're going to specialize or specify the number of hours. And for many reasons. I mean, we have already lots of professions that are working 2 or 3 days a week. Like, say, people in emergency services or in personal assistance would work on average 2 or 3 days a week because the shifts are much longer. So, like, for us to push for a simplified, like, 4 day week model would, completely alienate part of our membership and just suggest that we have no idea what we're working with. So obviously, yes, politically it can be a very good slogan to use and to create enthusiasm, but ultimately, the distribution. I mean, our focus is on the weekly number of hours. In our case, we are aiming for a 30-hour week, step by step, and reaching some, having some progress on that in that respect. But ultimately, the distribution of those hours is going to be decided, I mean, locally by the the type of work that you do, but also by individual preferences. So we're not going to take that away from the bargaining power of the local branches. Ultimately, I think I can add one, perspective to the discussion, which would be that, like, as a research officer, that we've seen, like, when we look at the economics of all this, and that slightly favors shorter working days over fewer working days, or at least suggests that they might be easier to implement or negotiate. And that is that for our sectors, like sectors that operate 24/7, such as welfare services, the current standards, today's full-time hours often result in overlapping shifts. And why is that? Well, in theory, you could have a split division of 3 8-hour shifts for a 24-hour day, obviously. But because of individual, people generally don't want to work at night, and they don't want to have like a shift break in the middle of the night. So what this implies is that in most of our agreements, night shifts are generally at least 10 hours long, because you work longer shifts so as to not have the shift change at 12 or like in the middle of the night. But what that implies for the day shifts is that they get, the bits of the puzzle doesn't fit neatly together anymore. So typically this implies that the day shift in elderly care in Sweden, for example, where we have, more and more people working full time. So they work full time 8 hours a day. And this implies that you work standardly from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then the evening shift would go from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. So you have this overlap of 2 hours. So essentially you create an overstaffing where demand is usually at the lowest level. And this creates, and those hours are, from an employee perspective, of minimal worth. But they're obviously of great worth to workers. I mean, coming home an hour before is, life-changing, But so what we see there is that focusing on that overlapping, having knowledge about, the scheduling in certain sectors, we can create, even in short term and even on a company level or employer level, local municipal level, create win-win situations where essentially a reduction whereby you reduce the overlap is basically self-financing purely from scheduling mathematics. And this is an advantage that we have when we look at the overlaps in schedules, and that favors slightly shorter days over fewer days, where the organizational implications for the employer are much greater. So, and that's also an important point when talking about, I think, regarding productivity, because we tend to think about, productivity increases in terms of like automation or work intensification, but actually especially in the public sector, I would say that most of the productivity increases that we indeed do observe are from organizational changes. And we have lots of inefficiencies in scheduling that are like mathematically inevitable, given the current norms, standards, the European Working Time Directive, which vastly sort of decreases the possibility for avoiding those overlaps by creating split shifts, for example, because then you don't have your daily rest periods, etc. So yeah, that's just like a technical argument for shortening for shorter days rather than fewer days. But yeah, all in all, yeah, focus on whatever works on a company or individual level, without a one size fits all approach, which I think is not what anyone's really suggesting, but it can be something that creates enthusiasm and it's engaging, right? So, but that would be my my general picture of what's going on. So focus on, I mean, the number of hours are the most important thing, but then how to achieve that politically, then the idea of a 4-day week can be very effective.
Thank you very much, and thank all the speakers for accepting our invitation. And now we go to questions and comments.
Hi. Is that on? Yeah. Okay. Bethany Staunton from the ETUI, European Trade Union Institute. Thank you for the really interesting presentations. I just had, I wanted to come back a bit to this point about the 4-day week that particularly you, Hampus, talked about it not. I completely understand the point about there being no one-size-fits-all approach and the huge variety we have. And that's very important when we get down to collective bargaining and the intricacies of collective agreements. But just to play devil's advocate a bit, isn't the point about the 4-day week slogan campaign, it's about changing what we consider to be the full-time standard? And so I was just wondering, how does that fit with the sort of what you said about that would never be centralized within a union agreement or campaign or approach? Is there no opportunity, do you think, of taking it on in that sense, that actually we need to change what we consider the full-time norm to be? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the presentations as well from me. One quick comment, what I found interesting in this whole debate about shorter working days or a shorter working week is that I'm not sure whether it can be generalized, but my experience in interviews was that in countries where people have to pay for childcare by themselves, or most of it at least, that there was a much bigger preference for a shorter working week because basically they could take their kids out of kindergarten for 1 day a week and they would tell me how many pounds that would save basically. And in other countries where you have a better public infrastructure for childcare, people would be more interested in shorter working days because it would be easier to fit into their schedule and so on. So that's just as a quick comment that basically the societal framework to me seems to make quite a difference. And then I'm sorry, but it's quite a technicality, but I'm also doing research on a 4-day work week in retirement homes. And I was interested in that issue of overlap times because there what they did was they went down to a 36-hour work week. So 4 hours reduction, and they made longer shifts out of that basically. And so they have this time of overlap much more than before now. And actually, it was welcomed by the employees because then you have overstaffing and it's a time where they can relax a little bit and there's more slack basically in the personnel staffing levels. And I was wondering whether you got any feedback on your from your members, whether they would be fine with giving up their overlap times basically because it's more attractive work in a way to have more people at hand.
Yes, I coming from the women's movement, and we always reclaimed the shorter working time every day because of the more just the possibility of the more just sharing of every kind of work. But in the recent debates, I experience a lot of arguments why also the shortening of 1 day would help for the more equal sharing of the care work. For example, we listened last week in the symposium of the Working Time Society in Berlin, one example where they asked people, they made 2 groups. One group made a working time reduction in 5 days and the other in 4 days. And then they asked the people who decided for the 4-day week, why? And there were the most of them had care obligations, not the one with the 5-day week. And I was asking how this is very funny. And then the speaker explained these were almost men, and they had with 1 day the possibility to visit, for example, their parents in the elder care house or to do the caring obligations in this 1 day to make to buy stuff and so on and so on. And this is a little bit similar to that what Philip just said before. I think many of the couples also have now arrangements where they can with 1 day free, one of the couple can do some things and the other on another day. And so I think it's not anymore as it was maybe before. And else I have a question to Hampus. You have the experience with the 6 days, 6 hours days from Göteborg. And have you compared a little bit the experiences from that with what now your members say on more free by 1 day?
Yeah, we have a question online. Do the panelists have any examples of high-skilled jobs or sectors like IT or finance where work and productivity is organized around project work involving work intensification and longer hours? And if so, what are your findings on reduced working hours or other ways of working?
Who wants to start? We'll go with the same order. Hampus, you can start.
Should I? Well, the first one, which the new standard, which I agree with, but I think that, well, I think if anything, it has to be like on a national level as a political project. But I think it's going to happen organically once we reach a certain level of reduction in working time, which is that's my short answer. Overlapping, whether it's good or bad, like taking that time away, meaning taking potentially some like less intense working hours away. I mean, most of our workers, from what we know from our surveys, etc., are that, well, yes, they prefer, less intense work over intense work. But I mean, a less intense 2 hours is not going to be as good as 2 days at home. I mean, they will always prefer going home an hour earlier over, a more relaxed extra hour at work. The distribution of unpaid work, was there something about as well? I'm just say that I think this is a very important issue, and I think that the reason why this is a very growing issue in Sweden is the fact that we basically introduced the 40-hour week in a society of housewives, right? We had there was a society where, yeah, it's obviously very different to work 40 hours and then you come home to a clean house, food's on the table, kids are picked up. That was basically what it was in the 60s or 70s when this was introduced in Sweden. Now we've had a very positive, development where women have entered the labor market. They now have we've been driving that as a union. But the other side of that coin is obviously lots of pressure on a household level. I would also say that, well, you can affect to some extent the distribution of unpaid work, but only to some extent. There's also a risk in this. I mean, what we see with our members is that many of them they now work more, paid labor, but they do exactly the same amount of unpaid work on the side. So it's a double pressure. And I think we just have to bear that in mind, that, to change the distribution, we have to work also with other forms of, like, say, parental leave and stuff like that, to be able to kind of incentivize a redistribution of work. Compare effects was also essentially we see similar effects between, reducing the number of days to reduce the number of hours per day in the research results. We see that a 6-day week gives on average, in a Swedish context at least, almost half an hour extra sleep per day. But the effect, and that's a very positive effect, obviously, but the positive effect is comparable when you take it into account that few days per week. So yeah, the health effects are comparable according to the Swedish, Stressforskningsinstitutet, which is like the institute on stress research. The final thing was about examples of skilled workers. I know this is I can't remember the question exactly, but like one thing I think is important to know or like to talk about when it comes to white collar versus blue collar workers. I know that this is different in many countries. White collar workers have experienced that they're constantly available and they're constantly online, constantly asked. But at least in a Swedish context, the working time reduction for like white collar workers has already happened. I mean, if you try to book a meeting a Friday afternoon with in Stockholm, it's not going to happen. No one's working. And I mean, when I come to my nursery and pick up my kids, people are dropping in at 9 o'clock in the morning and they're picking them up at 4:30 in the afternoon. If I come after 4:30, my kids are alone at the nursery. And this is because I live in an area where I know the parents, they all have full-time salaries. And previously we lived in an area with, blue collar workers, and the kids came at 7 in the morning and were picked up at, 5, 6 in the evening. So we have this massive inequality, definitely post-pandemic, where, white collar workers are doing their homework from home. I mean, you have, and you've taken away also the coming and going to the workplace, obviously, because they're not clocked at work. They're measured by what they're producing and not by the time they're at work. So we have this growing inequality, and I think that also fuels a lot of the anger, really, that we see amongst our membership, that most of them have to be physically at work all day, and they're essentially supervised 24/7 when they're working. So yeah, that's just a few reflections on the questions that came.
Christina or Silke?
Thank you very much. Interesting questions, at least. Also, we don't know, we just talk, we don't know exactly how it differs in blue collar and white collar work. So, for instance, financial sector, but there has been a big study in Germany on the 4-day week, which is now evaluated, has been conducted by Hans-Böckler Stiftung and Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. And in November, they will present the results. And I think that's going to be split throughout Europe, because it has been a study, a long-term study with 50 companies in very different sectors. And they all tried this 4-day week for quite a while and has been evaluated by researchers. So I think then we will know much more how it differs in different sectors, at least for Germany. But we wanted to say something about what Margarete just mentioned. Of course, people have different needs, and if you have care, you have to do care work. It really depends on whether you care for your children or for elderlies, and what age your children are, and if you are a single parent or if you have somebody else, or if you are many daughters and sons that care for somebody. So there is not that one fits all, but we know for sure that also in Germany we have that many, especially men, if they have a 4-day week, they take the 1 day in order to take care of their parents and do all the visits of doctors wherever they have to do, or they go to do the bureaucratic work with them. So yeah, it really depends. But if you're a single mother, you would definitely prefer to have a shorter working day, because many of women in Germany work in low-paid sectors, like, for instance, gastronomy and hotel, and they cannot afford to reduce their hours if they don't get any pay compensation. So definitely, but whatever we do to put more holes into the cheese of the full-time work standard is right. So it definitely leads, and we need all those arguments to counteract the debate of the employers that we all need to work longer hours. And especially in Germany, they came up with ideas to give bonuses tax-free for over hours. So we need to debate on the other side. We need to have a strong debate on reductions of working hours.
Thank you very much. Beate?
Yes, I think you already told it. When we look from the point of view of the care work, I think the 4-day week is very ambivalent. We can see that there are advantages, but we also see that there are problems, especially for the women, which have to do care work, normally children, which are in the kindergarten, and that closes. And the survey, Margareta, you told about, there were only men which they looked at. And if we look at men, they say, okay, we have 1 day more the week, and then we do the care work for the parents, we do the care work for the children. Okay, and what's about the other 4 days? That's the question. And so I think we have to do more experiences and surveys to look at this special point. But I think the debate and what now is going on is the 4-day week. We have a lot of examples of the 4-day week. There are first experiences, and we have a lot of people, especially the young people, which don't have children. They say we want to have the 4-day week. And if you look at the high-skilled workers, then you can see they have more possibilities of choosing their time and of choosing, for example, homework. And then you have another situation. So I think, to conclude, it is difficult to decide which is better. And sometimes in some sectors, in some professions, the 4-day week is better, and in other sectors, the reduction of work time per day is better. And if you look at the gender point of view, I think it's difficult with the 4-day week, but we will see. Time will show us what will happen, but it is necessary that we have a very strong reduction of working time. If we speak about 36 hours per week, for example, and we have a 4-day week, then we have 9 hours a day. And that's a lot of work. That couldn't be the aim, but I think all of you think the same. Thank you very much.
We have to stop now because there is a break, but you can ask during the break and keep talking and discussing. Thank you very much.